The screen is black. For a moment, there is only the faint, almost peaceful hum of a distant life support system. It's a sound of normalcy, of life thriving 150 trillion miles from home. Then, the hum is shattered by the sharp, ugly crackle of an open comms channel. A voice cuts through the static, a woman's, laced with a familiar Texan resolve, but stretched thin by a terror you can feel in your bones. Mayday, mayday. This is Governor and Richards of the New Austin colony, broadcasting on all emergency frequencies. We have multiple orbital hostiles, repeat, multiple hostiles. They dropped out of FTL, right on top of us, no warning. Her breathing is ragged fast. In the background, a distant siren begins its mournful, climbing wail, a sound that promises only bad news. We're hailing them on all channels. No response. God, they're not responding. They've begun atmospheric insertions. Their energy signatures they're off the charts. It's nothing we've ever seen. A deep, world-shaking bass rumble vibrates through the audio, so low it feels like a pressure wave in your chest. The siren is no longer distant. It's a piercing, relentless scream. My God, they're firing. They're firing on the Capitol. It's not a weapon, it's a wave of pure energy. It's turning our fields to crystal. The sky is on fire. Her voice cracks, breaking into a desperate shout over a rising roar that sounds like a mountain being torn in half. They're burning us out of our own damn sky. To anyone hearing this, to anyone, tell Earth. Tell everyone back home what they did to us. Tell them to remember. The transmission dissolves into a single, agonizing shriek of tearing metal and raw static, before being severed with the brutal finality of a guillotine. Silence. Heavy, absolute, and suffocating. 3 full seconds pass, long enough for the horror to sink in. Then, slamming onto the screen in a flash of molten fury. Scorched sky. In the sanitized reports that followed, the Celestial Compact called it an unfortunate incident on the fringes of charted space. Political jargon, designed to calm nerves and maintain the fragile balance of interstellar trade. But on Earth, they had a different word for it, massacre. 3 million Americans, pioneers who had packed up their lives, their dreams, and the red dust of their home state on their boots, were gone. They were teachers from Austin, oilfield roughnecks from Midland, engineers from Houston, and ranchers whose families had worked the land for generations. They had traveled 27 light years to build a new Texas under alien skies, a place called New Austin. Now, it was nothing more than a funeral pyre the size of a continent, a smoking crater visible from orbit. Deep beneath the Texas soil, in the hardened heart of the U.S. Space Command in Houston, the air was thick enough to choke on. Here, there were no politicians, only soldiers. At the head of a massive holographic table stood General Jackson Stonewall Armstrong, a man who looked like he was carved from granite and gunpowder. At 60, his face was a roadmap of past conflicts, his eyes a cold gray that had seen the vacuum of space and weren't impressed by it. On the table before him, the final, agonizing transmission from Governor Richards played on a loop. For the 17th time, the room listened to her voice break. For the 17th time, they heard the sound of a world dying. The silence that followed each playback was more sacred and more volatile than any prayer. Finally, Armstrong motioned to kill the feed. He swept his gaze across the 23 commanders in the room, the men and women who held the reins of humanity's entire military might. The Compact, he began, his voice a low rumble, is calling for restraint. They want a formal investigation. They want diplomacy. He paused, letting the words hang in the air like a bad joke. A cold, mirthless smile touched his lips. Diplomacy is what you try before you load your shotgun. A current of raw energy passed through the room. The grief was still there, but now it was being forged into something harder, something sharper. The President, Armstrong continued, his voice dropping, becoming deadlier, disagrees with the Compact. He straightened to his full height, his presence dominating the room. As of 10 minutes ago, he has authorized Directive, Scorched Sky. The name itself was a declaration. It wasn't a military plan, it was a statement of intent. Full mobilization, Armstrong commanded, his voice now like steel striking steel. Every ship, every reserve, every private military contractor. I want the mothball fleets in the Kuiper Belt reactivated. Get Texacorp on the line. I want their asteroid miners and deep space freighters fitted with railguns and military-grade shields. We are taking every gun we have, and we are pointing them all in one direction. The time for mourning was over. The time for hunting had begun. In the 72 hours that followed, the Earth didn't just mobilize, it transformed. It was a planetary metamorphosis, a shedding of its peaceful, commercial skin to reveal the hardened carapace of a warrior civilization beneath. From the sprawling orbital shipyards gleaming high above the Gulf of Mexico to the forgotten, mothballed fleets drifting in the silent cold of the Kuiper Belt, humanity awoke with a singular, violent purpose. Ships that hadn't tasted vacuum in 50 years had their reactors fired up, their hulls groaning back to life. Civilian freighters, behemoths designed to haul trillions of tons of ore, were dragged into military dry docks. Their cavernous cargo bays were hollowed out and filled with missile racks, their spines reinforced to handle the recoil of newly mounted railguns. Corporations, sensing the shift in the political wind and eager to show their patriotism, donated their private fleets without being asked. It was a national barn-raising, except instead of building a place to live, they were building an instrument of absolute vengeance. The sky, once a highway for commerce and exploration, became a traffic jam of pure, unadulterated firepower. Aboard the newly commissioned supercarrier, the USS Alamo, Major Maya Comanche Rodriguez stood on the forward observation deck. Below her, the blue curve of Earth was almost completely obscured by the sheer volume of steel assembling in orbit. She was a pilot, one of the best, a woman whose nerves were forged in high-G combat drills and asteroid field navigation. But this was different. This wasn't a fleet. It was an extinction-level event waiting for a target. Her hands rested on the cold plasteel of the viewport, her knuckles white. She wasn't just seeing ships. She was seeing the faces of her brother David, his wife Sarah, and their 2 kids, Emily and Sam. She could still picture the last video call, David grinning, covered in the reddish soil of New Austin, talking about a new strain of wheat that could grow in almost solid rock. He was a builder, a farmer, and they had burned him from existence. Quite a sight, isn't it, Major? The voice was low and familiar, carrying the weight of command. Maya straightened, turning to face General Armstrong. General, it's biblical. Armstrong came to stand beside her, his gaze fixed on the Armada. Your grandfather designed the FTL drives for the Lone Star, the ship that took the first settlers to New Austin. Hell of an engineer from Texas A&M. The mention of her family was a physical blow, but Maya didn't flinch. Yes, sir, and my brother followed in his footsteps. He wanted to build worlds, not fight over them. I know, Armstrong said, his voice softening just a fraction. That's why you're here, Major. I could have put 1,000 different commanders at the head of this first strike. I chose you because I don't need a diplomat. I don't need a politician. I need someone with fire in their heart. Someone who understands that this isn't a war for territory or resources. He paused, his eyes meeting hers in the reflection of the glass. This is pest control. He handed her a datapad. Primary aggressor, the Cathar hegemony. They're denying everything, of course. Blaming it on rogue elements. A damn lie. Maya's fingers flew across the datapad, her pilot's mind instantly processing the tactical data. These plasma burn patterns, they're a perfect match for Cathar siege cannons. And this attack formation, the coordinated orbital entry. She trailed off, her voice laced with cold fury. This wasn't a raid. This was a systematic extermination, planned and executed with military precision. Exactly, Armstrong confirmed. Which is why your first target will be their regional command station in the Orion Spur. You'll lead a vanguard strike force of 50 ships. Go in fast, go in hard, and leave nothing but wreckage. The USS Vengeance will be your flagship. Maya looked from the datapad back to the impossible sea of ships outside. 50 ships seems excessive for one station, sir. A grim smile touched Armstrong's lips. That's just your battle group, Major. That's just the tip of the spear. He gestured out at the endless vista of warships. The full fleet is 700,000 vessels. The number hung in the air, so vast it was almost incomprehensible. Maya felt a tremor run through her, not of fear, but of staggering, terrible awe. 700,000, it wasn't a fleet. It was a migration of predators. It was the collective rage of 12 billion people given form and function. Then Armstrong's voice, no longer a quiet conversation, boomed across the Alamo's bridge and was relayed, in an instant, to every ship in the fleet. Sons and daughters of Earth, you look up today, and you see the greatest military force in human history. Our enemies thought we would mourn quietly behind closed doors. They thought we would be shackled by treaties written by cowards who value profit over people. They were wrong. His voice rose, filled with the fire of a revival tent preacher and the fury of a vengeful God. Today, we are not diplomats. We are not politicians. Today, we are the reckoning. They set fire to one of our worlds, so we will bring a firestorm to their doorstep. Let every soul on every ship hear me now. Let the galaxy tremble at the sound of our engines. Remember New Austin. A thunderous roar of affirmation erupted across the comms network, the sound of 700,000 engines flaring in unison, a chorus of promised retribution. As the fleet prepared for the jump, one last, desperate communication request cut through. A holographic display flickered to life on the bridge of the USS Vengeance, revealing the stern, multifaceted face of a celestial compact diplomat. Major Rodriguez, the alien's synthesized voice began, dripping with condescension. The compact formally demands that Earth stand down this illegal and provocative display of military force immediately. Maya cut him off. She didn't shout. Her voice was quiet, deadly, and colder than the space between stars. Respectfully, Ambassador, where was the compact when New Austin burned? Where were your treaties and your demands when the ashes of our children were cooling on a dead world? That incident, the diplomat began stiffly, is under official investigation. Maya laughed. It was a sharp, ugly sound, devoid of all humor. Investigation? You can keep it. We're going to get answers our own way. She turned to her helm officer, her eyes blazing. Cut the channel. The diplomat's face vanished. All ships, Maya commanded, her voice ringing with absolute authority through the bridge. Engage FTL drives on my mark. Directive, Scorched Sky is now active. The universe outside the viewport twisted. 700,000 points of light flared as one, a new constellation of vengeance being born in an instant. Then, with a silent, coordinated tear in the fabric of space-time, the entire armada vanished, leaving the orbit of Earth starkly, terrifyingly empty. They were on their way. The transition from the churning chaos of hyperspace to the cold reality of normal space was jarringly instantaneous. One moment, the bridge of the USS Vengeance was a vortex of non-Euclidean light. The next, it was dead silent, staring out at the star-dusted black. And right in front of them, hanging like a malevolent steel spider in the void, was the Cthar border outpost Keltis 9. It was a formidable structure, bristling with gun emplacements and crowned by a massive sensor array. Under normal circumstances, it would have been a fortress, a gatekeeper to Cthar territory. Today, it was a tombstone waiting for a name. Before the Cthar operators could even register the impossible energy readings of 50 Terran ships materializing from nowhere, Maya's voice cut through the quiet of her bridge. All ships, weapons free. Target their shield generators and weapon arrays. Full spread. The word battle implies a struggle, a contest between two forces. What happened at Keltis 9 was not a battle. It was a demolition. A wave of plasma torpedoes, launched a microsecond after the fleet's arrival, crossed the distance to the station in a heartbeat. The outpost's shields flared, shimmering with brilliant energy as they absorbed the initial impacts. They held for exactly 1.3 seconds. Then, overwhelmed by a volume of fire they were never designed to withstand, they shattered into a cascading rain of prismatic light. The railguns spoke next. Firing projectiles at a fraction of the speed of light, they were silent killers. Streaks of incandescent fury slammed into the station's hull, punching clean through armor plating, control centers, and barracks. Secondary explosions blossomed like silent, deadly flowers as ammunition depots and power conduits ruptured. The station's own defense cannons, still sluggishly powering up, were vaporized before they could fire a single shot. On the bridge of the Vengeance, a harried communications officer announced, "Ma'am, we're receiving a priority hail from the station commander." "Put him on screen," Maya ordered, her eyes never leaving the tactical display. The image of a Cthar officer flickered into existence. His chitinous facial plates were shifting in a clear sign of extreme agitation, his mandibles clicking in a panicked staccato. "By what authority do you dash?" His translator struggled to keep up with his frantic clicks. "The Celestial Compact will hear of this. This is an act of unprovoked war." Maya leaned forward in her command chair, her face a mask of cold indifference. "Unprovoked?" she repeated, her voice dangerously soft. "Tell that to the 3 million souls you turned to glass on New Austin." She pointed a finger at the screen, an unmistakably human gesture of accusation. "The compact isn't here. We are, and we want answers." The Cthar compound eyes widened in feigned ignorance. "The human colony, we had nothing to do with that tragedy." "Save it for your interrogation," Maya cut him off. "Power down your remaining systems and prepare to be boarded." You have 30 seconds to comply before we resume fire and turn this entire station into radioactive dust." The outpost surrendered in 27 seconds. This scene, this brutal, lightning-fast assertion of dominance, was not an isolated event. It was a symphony of destruction, conducted across a dozen star systems simultaneously. As Maya's battle group secured Keltis 9, hundreds of similar human strike forces were hitting their own targets. Military shipyards in the Xanthar system, where Kthar vessels were built and repaired, were obliterated. Key defense platforms guarding interstellar jump points were overwhelmed and captured. Supply depots, communication relays, fuel refineries, the entire logistical spine of the Kthar military was systematically broken in the first 2 hours of the operation. It was a show of absolute, terrifying resolve. The Kthar High Command, cocooned in the safety of their distant homeworld, were still trying to verify the initial panicked reports from their border when a third of their entire military infrastructure ceased to exist. They had expected protests. They had expected sanctions and decades of toothless investigations from the Compact. They never, in their wildest nightmares, anticipated a 700,000-ship sledgehammer. Aboard the fleet flagship, the USS Alamo, General Armstrong watched the data flood in from across the front. Reports of victory after victory. Resistance was lighter than expected everywhere. The Kthar were powerful, but they were also arrogant. They had scattered their forces, confident that no single power would dare challenge them directly. They had no concept of an enemy that would throw its entire weight behind a single, coordinated punch. But amidst the reports of victory, a troubling pattern emerged. Intelligence teams, storming the captured Kthar command centers, began decrypting secure data cores. The first report came from Maya's team at Keltis 9. "General," her voice came over the encrypted channel, sharp and urgent. "We found something in their secure logs." Repeated references to something called Containment Initiative 7. Minutes later, a second report came in from a strike force deep in another sector. Then a third. The name was the same, Containment Initiative 7. It wasn't just a Kthar operation. It was a conspiracy. Armstrong's face hardened. "A coalition," he breathed. "Who else was involved?" "We're still piecing it together, sir," a young intelligence officer reported from his console on the Alamo's bridge. "But the data suggests a coordinated effort by multiple species. The Kthar, the Zarthan Collective, the Droll Imperium." He read off the names of 7 mid-tier powers in the galaxy, all known for their aggressive expansionist policies, and all of whom had lodged territorial disputes against human colonies in the past. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place in Maya's mind. Over the comms, her voice was tight with a fresh wave of grief and rage. "General, my brother's last message." He mentioned his work, their agricultural breakthroughs. They had successfully modified Earth crops to grow in alien soil compositions, without extensive terraforming. A cold silence fell over the Alamo's bridge as the full implication of her words sank in. A technology that would have allowed human expansion without the traditional limitations, Armstrong finished, his voice a low growl. A technology that would let us settle on worlds that these species had claimed for themselves but couldn't yet inhabit. "So they didn't just eliminate a colony," Maya said, the horror dawning on her. "They eliminated a perceived threat to their future ambitions. They murdered 3 million people because they were afraid of our farmers." The motive was no longer just vengeance for a past crime. It was now a preemptive strike against a future threat. These species hadn't just attacked humanity. They had declared, through their actions, that humanity's very existence and ingenuity were a threat that needed to be contained. "Continue the interrogations," Armstrong ordered, his voice echoing with a new, chilling resolve. "Break every code, access every file. I want names. I want locations. I want a list of every individual on every one of those 7 worlds who signed off on this." He turned to his fleet navigation officer. "And update the target packages. The Kthar were just the beginning. Our war just got 7 times bigger." As the human fleet, a vast and implacable tide of steel, pushed deeper into enemy space, the rest of the galaxy watched in stunned silence. The species that many had dismissed as aggressive, but ultimately harmless newcomers had unleashed a force unlike anything seen in centuries. This wasn't a war fleet. This was a reckoning. And the message was being burned into the stars for all to see. Humanity would not be extinguished quietly, and those who tried would face the full, unbridled fury of a species that had just realized it had nothing left to lose. On the 12th day of the campaign, the human fleet arrived. The The skies of Ctheria, the throne world of the Cthar hegemony, darkened not with an eclipse, but with the sheer mass of Terran warships sliding into high orbit. For the past week, the Cthar defense fleet had been systematically hunted and dismantled piece by piece across their own territory. What few ships remained to guard their home were swatted aside like flies. Now the heart of their empire lay exposed and vulnerable, staring up at the barrels of tens of thousands of guns. Aboard the USS Vengeance, Admiral Maya Rodriguez, field promoted for her decisive leadership, stood on the bridge. She watched as hundreds of human vessels moved into their final positions, a silent, perfectly executed blockade that choked off the planet from the rest of the galaxy. Their planetary shield grid is active, her tactical officer reported, but we're seeing fluctuations at grid points 7 through 11. Our long-range scans from the initial assault gave us their weak points. Estimate 3 minutes until breakthrough. Prepare landing craft, Maya ordered, her voice calm and steady. I want boots on the ground the moment those shields fail. But before they could fire, a new icon blinked on the communications console. Ma'am, the officer called out, a note of surprise in his voice. Incoming transmission from the Cthar High Command. They're requesting terms of surrender. A low murmur passed through the bridge crew. No one had expected capitulation so quickly, so completely. On screen, Maya commanded. The image of High Commander Kelzax appeared. His usually imposing frame seemed diminished, his chitinous plates dull, a physiological sign of extreme stress in his species. His translator conveyed his words, stripped of their usual arrogance. Commander, Admiral Rodriguez, the Cthar hegemony formally surrenders to the forces of Earth. We request an immediate cessation of hostilities. Maya kept her expression a neutral mask of granite. Surrender accepted, High Commander. But make no mistake, this is not over. She leaned forward slightly. We want the truth about New Austin. The complete truth. Kelzax's compound eyes shifted nervously. Of course, all relevant information will be provided. But you must understand, the Cthar were not the sole architects of this unfortunate incident. I've heard, Maya replied coldly. Tell me about Containment Initiative 7. The High Commander's plates clicked rapidly in shock. How did you know? We've been very thorough in our intelligence gathering, Maya said. Names. Now. 2 hours later, Maya stood in the cavernous, ornate chamber of the Cthar High Command. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and defeat. General Armstrong had transported down from the flagship and now stood beside her. Before them, a massive holographic projection displayed the names, affiliations, and details of the 7 species who had formed the so-called Containment Coalition. The Cthar hegemony, the Droll Imperium, the Zarthan Collective. Armstrong read the names aloud, his voice a low growl. All mid-tier powers in the compact. All with aggressive expansion policies. And all, he added, his eyes narrowing, who have had territorial disputes with human colonies. And all species who feared what we represented, Maya finished. According to these files, New Austin wasn't chosen randomly. It was specifically targeted because of my brother's agricultural breakthroughs. A fresh wave of grief and white-hot rage washed over her. They murdered 3 million people because they were afraid of our farming techniques. Not just techniques, Armstrong corrected grimly, pointing to a captured Cthar assessment report on the display. According to their own analysis, your brother's work would have allowed humans to colonize worlds previously considered uninhabitable without decades of expensive terraforming. Worlds that these species had laid claim to but couldn't yet settle. So they eliminated the competition before it could even start, Maya said, her voice flat. And they expected us to respond through compact channels, through diplomacy and investigation committees that would drag on for years while the evidence turned to dust. They never anticipated 700,000 ships, Armstrong said. The door to the chamber slid open. A human intelligence officer, a young captain with a grim expression, entered and saluted. Admiral, General, we've recovered something from their deep archives. I think you need to see this. Immediately. The officer transferred a data chip to the main holographic system. A new image flickered to life, a crystal-clear recording of a secret meeting. Representatives from all 7 coalition species were present. A droll speaker, identifiable by its translucent skin and multiple eye stalks, addressed the gathering. The human expansion cannot be allowed to continue unchecked, the droll's voice hissed. Their adaptability, their sheer rate of procreation, poses an existential threat to the established galactic order. The New Austin facility, with its agricultural breakthrough, must be eliminated before their technology can be implemented on other worlds. The camera panned, and Maya felt the air leave her lungs. It was High Commander Kelzax himself who responded. The humans will protest to the compact. There will be repercussions. The droll representative waved a dismissive tentacle. Let them. By the time any investigation concludes, the evidence will be ash. And if they dare to retaliate militarily, they are weak. They will find themselves facing sanctions from the compact itself for violating treaties. Either way, their expansion is halted. It is the perfect, logical solution. The recording ended, leaving the chamber in a profound, chilling silence. They never expected us to bypass the compact completely, Armstrong said quietly. He turned to the intelligence officer. Where are the representatives in this recording now? Most have been captured during our operations across the other sectors, sir. 3 remain at large, believed to be in Droll and Zarthan space. Not for long, Armstrong promised, his voice like the closing of a tomb door. The fleet is already adjusting its course. As the human armada expanded its operations to include the other 6 coalition members, the Celestial Compact called an emergency session, their diplomatic channels screaming with impotent rage. Mediator Toth, the same alien who had cautioned Maya against action, once again attempted to contact her. Admiral, the diplomat protested, his usual smooth tone now frayed with unconcealed fear. The compact demands an immediate audience. This military action has gone far beyond proportional response. It threatens galactic stability. Maya looked at the alien on her screen. The time for audiences was before New Austin burned, she said flatly. Now is the time for justice. This isn't justice, Toth shrieked. It's vengeance on a scale that will ignite a galactic war. No, Maya corrected him, her voice dropping to a dangerous calm. It's accountability. A concept the compact seems to have forgotten. Let me ask you, Mediator. Did you know about Containment Initiative 7? Did the compact approve the culling of a human colony to maintain stability? Toth's silence was damning. I thought so, Maya continued. The compact either knew and did nothing, or was too corrupt and incompetent to know what its own members were planning. Either way, humanity will no longer entrust its security to an institution that failed us so completely. We're done talking. She cut the transmission, leaving the galaxy to grapple with a new, terrifying reality. Humanity was off the leash. In the aftermath, Earth did not ask for a seat at the table. It built a new one and dictated the terms. The galactic conclave, humbled and exposed, had no choice but to listen. The 7 coalition members, their military power broken and their leadership in chains, surrendered unconditionally. The human fleet had suffered minimal casualties, a testament not to superior technology, but to the brutal, undeniable logic of overwhelming force. 700,000 ships had proven to be an argument no one could counter. The terms were not punitive, they were poetic in their justice. The coalition members would pay reparations, not in credits, but in resources and labor to help rebuild a new colony on the ashes of the old, a permanent, living memorial. The conspirators who planned and executed the attack would face Earth justice, tried not by an anonymous tribunal, but by a jury of their victims' peers. And most significantly, humanity formally withdrew from the Compact's mutual defense pacts. The message was clear: we will defend our own. Months later, Admiral Maya Rodriguez stood in a rebuilt garden on New Austin. The reddish dust of the world still coated everything, but life was returning. Green shoots, born from her brother's legacy, pushed up through the soil. General Armstrong approached, his uniform immaculate despite the frontier setting. The last of them has been captured, he informed her. The droll pre-march. He was hiding in an uncharted nebula beyond their territory. Nowhere is far enough to hide anymore. Maya nodded, kneeling to touch a new leaf. My brother would have appreciated the irony. They destroyed this world to stop human expansion, and instead, they triggered the most rapid and unified military deployment in our history. The galaxy has noticed, Armstrong said. We've received formal requests for defensive alliances from 17 previously neutral species. They see strength. They see resolve. He paused. And the Compact? They're still protesting our methods, but without conviction. They've begun their own internal investigations, trying to purge the corruption we exposed. He looked at Maya, a rare glimmer of pride in his eyes. The President has asked me to convey her personal gratitude. You've been promoted. The Nemesis battle group is being expanded into a full fleet. It's yours to command. Maya looked up at the sky, where the familiar silhouettes of human ships still patrolled the upper atmosphere. "What's our mission now?" she asked. "Deterrence," Armstrong replied simply. The president was clear. Never again. The fleet remains mobilized. The shipyards continue production. From now on, humanity defends its own. When the dust settled and the stars grew quiet again, the galaxy had learned a fundamental truth, a lesson written in plasma fire and the silent march of 700,000 ships. It's a lesson every Texan understands deep in their bones. You don't mistake kindness for weakness. Humanity reached for the stars with an open hand, ready to build, to share, to create. They offered progress. Their enemies saw it as a threat and chose to answer with fire, believing treaties and diplomacy would be humanity's shackles. They were wrong. They forgot that the same hands that can cultivate a field can also form a fist. The story of New Austin isn't just about revenge, it's about resolve. It teaches us that true strength isn't just about having power, but having the unwavering will to use it to protect what's yours when all other options are burned away. They thought they were dealing with farmers and explorers. They discovered too late that when you push a peaceful people to the brink, you don't create victims. You create survivors. And survivors, as the 7 humbled races of the coalition learned, finish fights. Underscore 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 underscore. If this story of cosmic justice got your blood pumping, be sure to smash that like button, subscribe for more epic sci-fi tales, and share this with a friend. Now for the real question. Was humanity's scorched sky protocol a truly justified response? When you're faced with an unprovoked genocidal attack, is unleashing a 700,000 ship armada the only language your enemies will understand? Or does that level of overwhelming, apocalyptic force risk turning you into the very monster you set out to destroy? Let me know your verdict in the comments below. Was this righteous fury, or the first step on a much darker path for humanity?